Our next speaker is Abby Ivory, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but let's just say it's about the Ivory Prize, which is a competition to find and then financially incentivize efforts from around the country to make housing more affordable. Sounds to me like a perfect fit for our forum, and I think Abby will open our minds to some new ideas that maybe we can put to work in Pennsylvania too. Let me tell you a little bit about Abby. She's a manager at the Sorenson Impact Center in Utah. She's currently working on a student-run fixed impact fund that will be housed at the University of Utah. Prior to joining the center, she worked at the Equilibrium Capital, where she first began researching development of green bonds, something we all love. While pursuing an MBA, she chose to focus on sustainability with specific emphasis on green bonds. Her research recently resulted in a published article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. Please join me in welcoming Abby Ivory.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today and tell you a little bit more about the Ivory Prize. And so what the Ivory Prize is, and I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of backstory on this as I get going. But what the Ivory Prize is it's been an effort that we've made to really recognize affordable housing or innovations in affordable housing. And to kind of start telling the story about it, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my background. So I've worked a lot in this social finance sector, and that's kind of what I work with at Sorenson Impact. We do a lot of impact investing across the world, and so we'll end up in Kenya or India and really looking at investments that are helping the base of the pyramid. But my father is a developer, and I grew up, can someone? Maybe not. Perfect. So I grew up in a household with my father's a developer, going out to job sites all the time, and he runs the largest home builder in the state of Utah, and they build about 1,100 homes every year and about 500 apartment units. And so I think I've been around this, and this is something that is not unfamiliar to me. And so when my dad kind of started thinking about this social issue behind housing, which was this gap. And so in Utah, what happened is we identified a housing gap, which was 50,000 units at the time. Sorry, okay. But nationally, from Lori Goodman, she gave us these numbers at the Urban Institute, was about 430,000 units. And so this was something that we started looking at as a really big social issue. And so in Utah, the number of households being created just are far, and that demand is far outstripping the supply of units that we have. And so we have about a 50,000 units shortage in the state of Utah, but across the country, a 430,000 unit shortage. And so this, resulted in the doubling up of units. It results in people kind of getting creative, or this is kind of the population that Dr. Zandy was talking about. This is his son that's living in his basement still at the age of 29. This is kind of that, group. And what we decided is that we need more units. And we understand that this is a really important problem for everyone. And so my dad kind of approached me and those of us who are working at the Sorenson Impact Center on this issue, and we partnered and we formed what's called Ivory Innovations. And Ivory Innovations is, a group whose primary motive is to really what we're really trying to do is we're trying to bring forward some of the great ideas in this housing affordability space, and we want to find them, we want to support them, and then we want to bring them back to the state of Utah and implement them. And that's something that's very important to us, is really being able to help and innovate in this space. And so after we formed Ivory Innovations at the Sorenson Impact Center, we started to think about how we could solve this problem, and we began to ideate and really start thinking through a couple of interesting ways to tackle it. And the first thing that we did, just because we're based at a university, was a competition called Hack a House. And Hack a House was so much fun. It was a way that we brought students together in a hackathon-style environment. And so if you're unfamiliar with hackathons, they're typically a 24-hour event where generally tech professionals are trying to use programming and different things to solve an issue. And we decided to kind of take that format and put it in the issue or towards the issue of housing affordability. And so we brought this group of students together and we had a ton of interest. We had over 100 students who were staying there for 24 hours and they were so passionate about it. And it just was exciting. And you could tell everyone cared. And there was a moment in this hackathon where things kind of came to a point and everyone really realized the importance of this issue. And that was when we had a speaker kind of walking around the event, and the speaker asked the question, why is housing affordability important to you? Why do we have 100 20-year-olds in this room that care about this issue? And one of the students raised his hand, and his name is Zach. This is a picture of Zach, and Zach said, I care about housing affordability because I'm homeless and I live out of my car. And when he said that, all of a sudden it just became such a tangible issue, and everyone kind of keyed in on it because it wasn't an issue that was, in Kenya or somewhere across the world, but it was an issue that was in our parking lot on our campus, and it was affecting this individual. And Zach is awesome. I got to know him a little bit, and he is a student of engineering, and his background he comes from a household where two parents, neither of which went to college, were unable to support him financially as he's gone through college. And he identified, getting a degree to be his way out of the situation that he's been placed in. And he really wanted to get a degree in engineering because he thought, there are a lot of career opportunities that could come from that. And so he has worked, really hard to get himself in a position where he can, overcome the circumstances that he was born into. And in so doing, he has been unable to afford housing, and it has instead prioritized his education. And fortunately, we were able to get the student into housing, which was great for the year. But I just recognize this as an issue because I think a lot of times we think about housing affordability or people who are homeless who are struggling with this as someone who's really far off, or someone who's struggling with mental addiction or mental health issues or addiction, and I think that can be something that we can really distance from ourselves. But when you see that this is someone that's really working and trying so hard that's unable to afford any sort of housing, whether that's, in this case, it would be rental, I think the issue becomes so much more important, and it really did for these students that were at the event. And they started creating all these solutions. And one of the solutions, the winning solution that came out of it, was a housing unit that you bought. It was like modular unit, and as you needed more space, you added onto the unit, and as you needed less space, you took some stuff off of it. So it was like Legos. You build in and build out. But what's kind of cool, we thought this was super innovative at the time and really interesting, but actually as we went through this Ivory Prize process, we came across a company that's here in Pennsylvania that does just that. And maybe some of you guys know Module or Brian, and Brian runs that, but it's a really interesting company, and they do that exact same thing. It's super, super innovative, and they just barely finished their first home, so if you ever want to take a look at that, you totally should. And so just kind of moving on to our next point, which is this Ivory Prize. And this was kind of the next thing that came out of this Ivory innovation effort. And so the Ivory Prize is a much more traditional approach to coming up with these solutions and looking for innovations. And so what it is it is an annual award that is recognizing ambitious, feasible, and scalable solutions. And so this was designed to award innovators for their efforts and provide material support to their products. And so it's been it's been a really interesting thing to kind of get started, and we started this last year. And when we kicked it off, we gathered together a group of leading housing experts from across the country. And so we pulled in Lori Goodman, who's the VP of Housing of the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute, Chris Herbert, who's the managing director of the Joint Center for Housing of Harvard University, and then Carol Galante, who runs the Turner Center for Housing Innovation at UC Berkeley, and then Kent Colton, who's the former executive director of the National Home Builders Association. And this group came together, and they had so many interesting ideas, and they knew so many people who were really working on it, and ended up identifying 3 categories for us where we awarded prizes, and those 3 categories were policy and regulatory reform, financial innovation, and then also construction and design. And so through this process, we were actually able to receive 129 nominations from 29 different states. And so this was a really fun process, and we actually had a lot of outreach and a lot of response. And it was kind of like Hack a House. You know, we go into this with an idea, and we come out with something that was so much bigger, and it kind of happened again with this. So we've been through all these applicants and reviewed it, and kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today is not necessarily the issues, but the potential solutions that we've seen coming out of housing affordability, or coming out of this kind of crisis. And so the first approach for successful innovation in housing affordability, we believe, is to build more housing. And this is super important, and this is for sure a trend that we've seen coming across all of our different nominees. And we had, you know, through all these nominees, about half of them were in the construction and design category, and 46% of that, which was about 46%, and most of them were in modular construction, or modular design and construction. And I think that's a really interesting trend, because if you look at the number of homes that are built nationally in this modular space, it's about 3.3% of that accounts for 3.3% of total homes built annually in the United States. And so this is a really interesting juxtaposition for me, because I think that this is the place where we're starting to innovate in construction and design. And if you really think about it, the tech sector has blown up, but it hasn't really been applied to housing. And by using this modular approach, you're starting to apply principles that they've used in the tech sector to actually build and grow housing. And we saw quite a few different groups coming through in this space, but I want to show you a video. And that's a video of our winner in this category of construction and design. And they are called Factory OS, and they're based in Vallejo, which is up next to San Francisco. And they are putting out 3 apartment units a day, which I've been to quite a few different housing factories, I guess, as I've been, looking through all of this. And this factory just absolutely blew me away. And so, right here.
What you'll see out there is unbelievable natural light. This building that was a gift to Larry and me has beautiful windows that create a work environment that is inspirational for workers.
I think everyone that works here knows that they're doing something truly special, and something that we're just the tip of the iceberg of what our capabilities ultimately are.
In 2014-15, as a developer, I was just looking at construction costs spiraling up, and so I sat down with Larry and said, I think we've got to do this with a different approach. I felt if we can build affordable housing at half the price of the spiraling number going up, we'll get twice as much out of it. And once we start doing that, it inspires people around us to help cut costs that are also affecting affordable housing.
So the best way for me to describe the factory to you is we're roughly 256,000 square feet. Our factory is made up of primarily 33 different workstations. So right here you see the floor of the actual modular is being built. All right, James, how you doing, man? This gentleman here is making sure that we're sanding down any joints and ridges that we have in our plywood to make sure that our floors are absolutely smooth and have zero transitional issues. As you come down here to station number 4, you're gonna notice that all these floors are prepped and ready for interior wall sets. This is where Matt fabricates the interior walls and then sets them on the modulars before sliding them from station 5 to 6. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing good, Larry.
What are we?
Second to none.
You betcha, baby. So we are. This is station number 6. This is where both sidewall jigs are made. It's also where we go ahead and set the sidewalls on the boxes themselves. You'll notice that all it takes here is one gentleman using the crane and one gentleman walking along with the wall. And that's literally, it's a two-man crew to set the walls. So once that volume moves from 7 over here to 10, the top will get set, it'll then get set in the queue, and then the balance of all finished work gets accomplished as it moves down the line to station 33. In case you didn't know, I love this place. Don't film Rick without his hard hat. He's one of my worst offenders. All the volumes that leave Factory OS have a plywood sheathing over the top and then have an EPDM coating for weatherproofing to make sure that we get no water intrusion while in transit or while erecting on site. And then at the last station, we then ship them out. All right, cool, we done? Yeah, Rick, get Rick.
This unit is Unit 205 of the Union, our project at the corner of 5th and Magnolia, 1 block from the West Oakland BART station.
If you can imagine this, a 5-story building will go up in 10 working days.
In 6 months, you'll leave this unit at 8 a.m. and be in San Francisco at 8:15. So you'll be in a unit that you go, I got a meeting in San Francisco in 15 minutes. You can walk out your home, be on a train, and be in the city at that meeting in 15 minutes.
Okay. These guys are some of my favorite people. And this factory, if you ever get a chance, if you're up in Vallejo, you really should check it out. It's incredible. And they really are solving that problem. They're super passionate about it. So they are dropping housing prices by at least 20% in the Bay Area with their units, which is a huge, it's hugely important that for everyone who's there and especially for their workers. And currently they're working on building some workforce housing for their workers as well with their units and being able to put them in, which is a big deal for employees that are typically in the construction industry. Okay, this brings me to my second point for successful innovation, which is preservation of current housing stock. And so we talked about there's a lot of stuff out there that's available, and this is one of the cheapest ways that we can continue to hold down this affordable housing stock is by preserving it. And so we have a couple of groups who came to us with the Ivory Prize that are preserving homes. And one of my favorites is in Detroit, and it's a group called Century Partners. And what they do is they've gone on into these blighted communities and they find homes, that are selling for $20,000, $30,000, and they're rehabbing all of these homes. But it's a really community-driven approach, and they go out and find, their employees or people who are going to work to reconstruct these homes kind of in the community. And they bring them up and they train them. They show them how to frame or help them learn a skill so that then once they've finished the homes, these people will have the ability to actually afford them and that they will have a steady income so that they could get into a home. And I think it's a really awesome community-driven approach to things. And then we've also seen a lot of large funds that came into this process, and some of the funds, one of them in particular is called Turner Impact Capital, and they have a fund that's about $300 million that's specifically allocated to preserving affordable housing. And in most of it is actually workforce housing stock, but it's interesting to see that people are kind of going in and making a big effort to buy this out and then preserve it. This brings me to our third approach or solution, and that is creative financing. And this is my favorite solution because I am kind of nerd with the finance things, and I love looking through this and digging through what we could do. And one reason why I think it's super important is because, number one, this, being able to purchase a home is actually the number one wealth creator for everyone across the country. And so if you can buy a home, you're building equity and then you're sitting on it. And this is something that's super important for a lot of people. And this is why, home ownership is so important, and it's why it's been the American dream. But if you think about the financial side of that, we haven't had any innovations in finance and housing since 1930 with the 30-year mortgage or the 15-year mortgage, which kind of enabled people to push out their housing payments over a longer period of time so that they could actually afford to get into homes. And so we have seen quite a few people who are doing really interesting things in this space. And I'm going to show you, we saw so many that came in that we chose 2 winners in this category for the prize. And the first one that I'll show you in a video is called Home Partners of America. And they're based out of Chicago, and they have a lease purchase program, which is really phenomenal. And it's benefited quite a few people over the years. And they're currently focusing a new product on people who are making lower than 80% of the area median income, which is fantastic. And then we have another group that we'll show you called Landed, and they're helping with down payment assistance, specifically for teachers in some of the most expensive cities and starting out of the Bay Area. So we'll just go in a couple more videos.
Coming out of the financial crisis, I grew up at Citibank. What became clear to us was that the mortgage market was going to change significantly. And where it was very easy for people to get access to credit, it was going to become very difficult for a lot of Americans to get access to credit. So one of the things that we focused on was how do we provide access to capital to get people into good communities and good homes. And so we came up with this idea of lease purchase. So instead of just renting a house to somebody, let's underwrite that individual as if they're buying the house, use some of the same metrics, let them pick the house they want to live in. We'll buy it for them, lease it to them, and they can buy it later on.
My name is Tracy Jeter. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Home Partners of America. Every Friday morning here at Home Partners, we will get together as a company. Each different department gets an opportunity to speak in front of the entire company. Choice Lease is going to be a huge program for us as well. All of the regional account managers will be training agents on how Choice Lease can better their business and also help them help more residents that maybe don't have the income that they would to qualify.
Many families making $40,000, $50,000, even $60,000 a year, depending on the city, have a very difficult time getting access to affordable housing. We have decided as a firm we will allocate $25 million of equity capital. And then, we're very fortunate that Citi has agreed to provide a low-cost loan. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide lower-cost capital to moderate-income consumers in the form of a rent subsidy or a reduced rent. And then what we're going to do is use the same model where we approve them, let them pick the house they want to live in, we'll buy it for them, lease it to them, and they can buy it later on.
I'm Jeff Polanzi. I am the Vice President of Acquisitions. When a future resident applies, all the way through the closing of the property and eventually the resale of the property, all falls under my responsibility.
The team that you see behind me have been successful in helping almost 14,000 families get on the path of home ownership.
One of the advantages to a resident with our program is if they find a great home, we buy it and lease it to them. And if house price appreciation is above what their purchase rate is each year, they can buy the house for the purchase rate.
I'm Ben Helwig. I'm one of the founders, along with Bill, of Home Partners. I really love coming to work here for 3 reasons. One, I think the business opportunity that we have is nearly limitless. Second, I really think that the proposition that we offer to consumers is giving them opportunity that they otherwise wouldn't have. Thirdly, I'm really proud of the team that we've got here at Home Partners, and I really enjoy coming to work with them every day.
And it's neat, we're helping people get access to great quality housing.
So that's Home Partners. And then we'll flip into this next group called Landed.
We began thinking about Landed while going to graduate school at Stanford University. Jonathan and I were business school students there, really curious about what the future of living in cities was going to be like, recognizing how expensive things would become. I come at this work, my mom was a 4th grade school teacher, dad's social worker, and it wasn't until we were able to own our home did fortune change for my family, sent me to colleges I went to, etc. So I kind of lived the experience of what it means to feel grounded and rooted once you are able to have permanent housing. So when we looked at what Stanford University does for its staff to help retain its talent there, we realized they had an awesome program that's a shared equity down payment assistance. And we said, hey, everybody maybe could use this, especially our public educators and people who we need to stick around in our cities. So there's 2 parts to Landed. One part is a real estate brokerage that helps individual educators purchase homes, and we partner with real estate agents who actually help our educators buy a home. And then we have funds that we set up alongside outside nonprofit organizations that put money into these funds. And the money is available for down payment assistance. And so that down payment assistance goes into homes, and in the future, the home buyer pays back what they got and shares in some of the change in value of the home, either up or down, depending on what happens by the time they sell or refinance their home.
My name is Carrie Callahan. We are in Burlingame, California, and I teach a 2-3 combo class. My husband and I have wanted to purchase a home for a long time. We have always said we're 2 years away, we're 2 years away, we're 2 years away, and we've said that for about 8 years. And I was born and raised here. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and we wanted to make our home here. And it was really hard to do because we were just realizing we were always just saving just enough, and then the housing prices would go up, and then you'd save just enough and the housing prices would go up again.
So one of the things we talk about at Landed is that there's really two parts to affordability. There is the month-to-month ability to afford your rent or your mortgage. So can I afford a roof over my head? And then there's another question of, can I access ownership? And that's the area that we really work in. So once somebody is in a place where they're kind of have, even if it's a stretch, has their month-to-month cost of housing under control, we try to say, okay, you have the option to be an owner as well for more or less the same cost. And it means a lot for a lot of people. It's kind of, I like to think about it as democratizing who gets to be owners.
We wanted to stay where our family is, and our family is here. And you hear from people, oh, you know, move where it's more affordable, and you don't need to pay that much for a house. But that's really hard to do when your friends and family and what you've grown up with is here. And for us, owning a home meant we could stay here. And we were about a year away from moving about an hour and a half up to Petaluma, and Landed helped us not have to do that.
Teachers are some of the hardest working people in the world. They care a lot about their job, but oftentimes, if not all the time, they care about their job because they have this dual sense that each individual person is really, really special, but also as a whole, humanity is really special. And so it means that there's not a better group of people to start our work with than educators, who really are such a light for our society.
Awesome. Okay, so those are two of our financial innovations, and I'll just be quick through this last part, but our fourth approach to successful innovation that we came across was innovative use of existing housing. And the primary the primary thing that I think exemplifies this is a company in Boston, and they're called Nesterly. And what Nesterly does is they pair college or students, any students, I guess, up to like PhD, because they have a lot of students in Boston, with an elderly population that ends up having a lot of space in their homes because their children have moved out over the years, and it's kind of a matching program. So someone, like a student, will say that they're okay with mowing the lawn for a decrease in rent and living in extra space, and someone who's maybe a little bit older who needs a little bit of help around the house. And they've seen this program be very, very, very successful over there, and I think it's something that will be replicated in a lot of other cities. There was one other example here, and it's a group called Neighbor, and they're based out of Utah. And what they do is they let people rent their storage space. So if you have any excess storage space in your home, you can rent it out to someone, and then you can use that as your own personal income. And that also helps you when qualifying for a mortgage. You can list that income, and so it's helped a lot of people get into housing. And it's also cheaper for people than renting actual storage space. So these are a couple ways people are actually using their existing housing to either generate income, or mostly to generate income, I guess, on both fronts. And then our fifth, and I would argue maybe the most important approach to successful innovation, is removal of regulatory barriers. And I think this needs to happen on a local, a federal, and also a state level. I think that there are so many barriers that we come across in construction that really impede the process, whether it has to do with zoning, or whether it has to do with different challenges with permitting. And as we've watched the modular housing thing, a lot of it is with housing inspection, and people don't really know, a lot of governments don't really know how to go in and inspect these modular units because it's not what they're used to, and it doesn't fall under their normal purview. And in that case, it can kind of sometimes eliminate the efficiencies that are created with modular housing, because they'll spend a lot of time digging through a home, opening up walls, just to see what's in there. And so I think that maybe accounts for why we've seen so few of this. But if we're able to kind of educate governments on this and kind of pull back on some of this regulation, I think we could push, homes or push this process through a little bit faster, which would actually increase our savings in this area. And one group that's done a phenomenal job at this is a group out of Austin, Texas, and they're called Alley Flat, and they won our prize this year. And I will let them kind of explain what they do in their video really quick. Last one.
The Austin Community Design and Development Center is a nonprofit organization that believes that the design of our everyday environments should take into account the needs, the voices, and the local leadership of the communities. And so through the work that we do in research, in community planning, in policy, in design, we make sure that we're building neighborhoods that are healthy and that are equitable.
So our city, like a lot of growing cities, has a lot of single-family neighborhoods really close to the downtown core. So the Alley Flat Initiative was really created as a way to put more units on the ground while still respecting that neighborhood culture that everybody here really treasures. So an Alley Flat is just a detached single-family house that's just built in the backyard of a single-family property. And through our program, that back house is occupied by a low-income renter, and they're paying rent just like anybody else, and that rent helps that front property owner gain a little bit of extra income to be able to accommodate extra living costs, but we're also providing an extra affordable rental unit in a single-family neighborhood.
So we had a double-car garage, and I think the previous owners had added a workshop onto the back of it. I think he repaired bicycles or something like that. So it's a double-car garage plus, and we use the same footprint to convert it into a one-bedroom, one-bath apartment. And I love the idea of increasing affordable housing. It's a huge problem in Austin.
In 2015, there was a change to the accessory dwelling unit land development code in the city of Austin, which we were a part of advocating for. And that ordinance change made it possible for us to build on smaller lots, and it also reduced the parking requirement in neighborhoods that are close to public transportation to be able to really maximize the placement and the amount of space that you're able to give over to that second unit.
From the very earliest time, Nicole was so receptive to our concerns and the things we wanted. And not only did she do such a great job with the architecture and helping us work through the whole application or process to be approved for the Alley Flat Initiative, she oversaw the work that the contractor was doing and even had to bring to their attention sometimes coding problems and things like that. So that was enormously helpful to us.
How we see ourselves operating in the future is to really be pulling together all of these different components of policy, research, design, and planning to make sure that the voices and leadership of the communities impacted are really present in making decisions about them.
Okay, so I really love this group and what they've done with accessory dwelling units and code. And it's not mentioned in the video, but they're also very instrumental in passing a $250 million bond this last legislative session called Proposition A that went to affordable housing, which was a really, really big deal down in Austin. And I just kind of, at the end of this whole process, we brought all of our 10 finalists together. And for me, this was the pivotal moment of the whole thing because everyone was so excited to come together and share best practices with each other, challenges and maybe, ideas for how they could change different things. And we sat in Washington, D.C. With this group and we talked and we had a 2-hour conversation and then it wasn't enough. The group went out to dinner after to continue learning from each other. And I think that's one of the most important things that we learned from this process is the importance of learning from each other and collaborating and really being able to see outside of your own sector that you're in. If you're in the financial sector, it's really great to understand what's going on the policy and regulatory side or what's happening with construction. And I think it really, helps them provide with a new perspective and new ideas on how they can continue to solve this problem. And as we move forward, we're starting the Ivory Prize again for another year for round 2. And we would love to see some really great ideas coming out of Pennsylvania. So if you guys know of, or if you have any interest or any ideas, we'd love to talk to you about it. This is our website, so kick me any ideas that you have, and thank you so much for your time.